Hey, yeah, so I'm Daniel. Like a year ago, I started my first job in tech, and we use Ember like solely as our app. So in this talk, I'm going to be talking about like my experiences with Ember over the year and some of the cool things that I found about it. So yeah, so that's me. Some of my background. I'm currently a junior front-end developer at a startup in Cambridge. I'm on like a placement year from university, so I've been here over the last year on placement, and this is where I discovered Ember. I work for a company called Repositive. We're in Cambridge, and we're building like a web platform for genomic researchers to share and collaborate on data. So last year when I joined the company, we had an existing Ember app. It was on Ember 13. And we had a pretty small team. There was only one other Ember developer at the time. So this gave me a lot of pretty cool opportunities to jump in and play around with the Ember app. So yeah, some of my experiences jumping into Ember in the first place. So at this time, I didn't really have much experience as a JavaScript sort of framework developer. I just had some small web experience with Bootstrap and jQuery and things like that. So jumping into Ember was quite a challenge and a bit different, but yeah. So one of the things I discovered quite early on was the fast release cycle of Ember. And when at the time, it was around last August, the Ember 13 had just sort of been released and we had just updated. So a lot of the resources I found online, I was learning things and it was quite difficult to tell what had been deprecated or not. So that was quite maybe a hindrance at first, but yeah. And obviously, we all know that Ember has pretty strong opinions, and as a junior developer, this is quite a difficult thing to jump into. Yeah. So the conventions of Ember are pretty strong, and they are very difficult to jump into as a beginner. But once you get going, and you know how everything flows, you have a pretty strong idea of how to build your apps in the first place. So everything starts in the URL, which is mapped to the router, to a route, which loads in which you can call the model hook and load in your data, which you then can render into the templates and render components from there. So the first real challenge, I guess, in my Ember experience was embracing the conventions and learning the opinions of Ember so I could use these to best utilize them. So yeah, they were difficult to understand at first. But once I started getting comfortable with Ember CLI, you get a really strong project structure. You can generate the objects you need easily. And you can really understand how you should be building your apps. And you can get to a stage where you're building pretty complex apps when you're still a beginner. You're not really an expert. Which makes you feel pretty great. So you end up dancing around like Tom York. So the second sort of point, I guess, this is something I really liked about Ember, is that you can kind of base your development on route driven. So you have like states of your app, and you get your mockups from your designer, and you can work quite closely with this, and you can build your applications based on that state. And this is really nice because you already know which route you need and how you can structure your app that way. And then you get your architecture as that. So you would have every sort of state defined inside one route, and it's pretty cool. So I guess for example of this and some of my things, this is like a experiment I have with Sketch. The example basically is like a small books app. So this is the author's route. The router/authors. So you have like a list of authors on the side which you could theoretically search through, and then inside you'd have the content zone where the books would get rendered into the outlet of the authors. And then again, the next mockup would be the list of books for each author. You define that with the author's ID as the dynamic segment, and then the books route in there. So you would list out all of the books for that author in this mockup. And then next you would have the individual book as the thing. So this is the single book route with the book ID as the segment, and then you just display that. So you would be able to tell just from your short mockups like what routes you need, and you don't need to really make assumptions on how to build this. You just sort of already know that you need 4 routes and you can nest them inside each other. So your router would look something like this, and it's really clean and easy to understand. So you'd have the authors, an individual author with an author ID, then your books inside that with an individual book. And then you can build your templates and controllers around this. And this for me was something that I really liked early on, and it helped me to jump in and definitely know what I was doing without much experience, which was pretty cool. So something I had issues, I guess, with at the beginning was the idea of data down and actions up. So this is the premise that like your data flows down from your root into your controller and then down into the components, and then your actions would be sent from the component up to the controller, up to the root, which you would use to update the values of the data there. So that kind of looks something like this. Your root has calls the data, passes down to the component, passes down to the controller to the component. And then when you would if the component has an action to mutate this data, you would send it back up the other way. Yeah, so this was something I had issues with. We had lots of components that had like several layers deep of components, so it was quite a strong hierarchy, and it was quite hard to keep track of where this data was going and where you would be sending it and stuff. Especially when you're bubbling actions up several layers. So again, an example from the books app from before. On the books route, so each individual book, you can imagine that each book here is a component, and inside this, like a book item component, and inside this book item you would have the cover of the book, which links to the individual book, and a nested component for a star rating, which the user can update the rating from 1 to 5 stars outside of the root, so you could do it straight from this component. So if I walk through the example of this, you would need to return all of the books, and you would display a book item for each book. And you pass the data down into the component as book equals book, and this can get all of your records. So next you can start building the component. And as I would expect, you can define the markup for this. So we have like a link to the book, the book cover, and a star rating component, which is then passed again the book object. And it has an on-click action to set the rating from a max rating of 5. So you would expect to be able to define the logic here and set the rating, so you could pass in the book object and set the rating and then save it to the model. But as I found out after several experiments, that this doesn't really work, so you end up a bit confused. So a solution for this, well, the solution for this is you send the action up from the component. And so here, back in the book item component, you send the object up to a action in the controller called update rating. And in the controller, there's again the logic from before, where you simply save the book rating and save it to the model. Yeah, so that's a simple example where you're nesting it, well, you're passing it up 2 layers. But as I found out before, if you have several layers of this, it can get very confusing, and I got lost many times trying to do this. So finally, once you've done this, you can pass the action to the component call. So here we give the book list, or the book item component, the update rating. And as you can see, the user would be able to click and update the rating here. So yeah, that would be the workaround of the data down actions up. So another strong point for me, being an Ember developer over the past year, was the community. Especially like events like these, I felt very included. It's very active, and I definitely learn a lot every time I come here and to Ember Camp and stuff like that. I've also had some really great experiences with some of the maintainers of add-ons. If I've ever had an issue, people have been more than happy to jump on Slack or a Skype call to help you out and get you out. So that's been one of the strong points for me as an Ember developer over the year. So yes, this is sort of summarize the lessons I've learned over this over my career as an Ember developer. The first would definitely be to embrace the conventions. I guess this is the first learning point for any Ember developer, especially with the lack of experience I had before. Learning this was a strong point, and you jump into building the apps very fast once you've understood these. So yeah, you can feel pretty experienced without really the experience. The second lesson was following the route-driven patterns in your design. So you can work really strongly with the designers again. And I like the idea of being able to turn mockups straight into routes, and it's just a nice flow. And again, the data down, actions up flow. This was one of the more confusing points for me. And once I got this, I was much happier. And again, being more involved with the community, it's really helped. And I definitely think it's one of the main reasons why being an Ember developer is pretty great. So yeah. So I guess more about the future. I'm excited to see where Ember goes, and there's been some pretty cool developments recently. Excited to see what happens with rootable components, and the work that's been happening recently with Glimmer 2 has been pretty exciting. And again, staying involved within the community and being a part of this is really cool. So yeah, that's me.
We've got time for some Q&A if you want to field a few questions.
Sure. Yeah.
I've got one.
Okay.
Which you mentioned add-on assistance to maintainers. Which add-ons in particular did you mean?
So I had some issues with our Ember Simple Auth package before, and Marco was more than happy to. He jumped on a Skype call with us and helped us out, and that was pretty great. And I've spoken to people from Dockyard on Slack because they have obviously many packages and got some pretty cool assistance there. So yeah.
I've never done anything with them before. What would you say are some good resources for going ahead and getting stuck into this?
Sure. Well, the Ember guides are pretty great now. They're probably the best place to start. There's a whole walkthrough of every sort of concept of Ember. There's a few blogs like Ember Igniter and Program with Eric, which I used quite heavily. They're pretty cool. Yeah.
Ember 101 book 3 online.
Yeah, that one.
Okay. What's Glimmer 2? What does it do?
So it's a rendering engine. It basically improves the performance of the rendering of the HTML bars templates. And there's been a lot of work on that recently.
Okay, let's have another hand.